Did you tweet?
Tweeting?
It is.
Did it tweet?
You did. I just retweeted.
Yay.
Once you retweet, then people show up.
Wait, did you tweet, Scott?
Hang on,
How are we going to do that?
I'm busy reading leaked emails here. Hang on a second. Some of Damian Edwards' leaked emails about.
Yeah.
Oh, those are scandalous.
Apparently, he knew about the project.json thing 20 years ago.
You can't prove that. Where are you getting this, Scott?
There's a hot mic. I've got you talking at TechEd 2008.
Where are you getting this?
About. It's on Live Leak. I'm on Live Leak.
False.
False. Wrong.
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 I didn't say that.
All right.
It's almost
Hang on, I'm downloading Gears of War on this machine. Okay. Hello, friends. It is the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. We're back together. I was shunned this last episode. Not allowed on my own show. They had it on an alternative network. But we've
Lifetime.
But we put it back together. We've got everything running smoothly again on my YouTube channel, which still needs to be really moved somewhere else.
It really does need to be moved somewhere else.
I'm telling you, man. We may just need to make an ASP. You know what we should just do? We should just make an ASP.NET one. Who wants to write the for loop for me? Here. Who wants to write the for loop? This is you, the community, that rips all of the MP4s of the last 100 episodes of this and then re-uploads them to another thing. Do that, and I will
as a
give
UWP
you,
app.
If you do that for me, you have to do it and ask and then do it. Don't just do it and then ask. And then I will give you a special gift that we are currently developing for a .NET open source peoples.
Wow.
I'll announce that. Yeah, it's cool. I'll announce that soon. Very exciting.
Oh.
No, it's going to be good. It'll be a unique thing that only certain people will get. All right,
I work
cool.
in .NET open source. Can I get one?
You can absolutely get one. I will absolutely give you one of these special personalized gifts that will be unique in the world. And it's like not a piece of tchotchke. This is something you're going to want. It's special.
Ooh.
I get the proofs in a couple of days. Cool. John Galloway.
Yes.
So you've grown a beard, and it looks like Damien's grown a beard, and I shaved, apparently, but failed to comb my hair. So here on .NET Lack of Grooming, let's talk about the community. John, I'm going to switch over to you, and let's hear what you have to say about what's been going on in the community lately.
Let's do that. Okay, well, first of all, I just wanted to feature this. I don't know if we've talked about it, but this Asp Net Free Courses thing, this is new and exciting, and there's some free courses there. So
yeah, so this is Maria.
What is that?
Maria from my team has been working with course makers from all over, from boot camps to Kevin Jones, who who did an Emory Microsoft Virtual Academy, Jimmy Bogart from Headspring, Code School. They all have ASP.NET and ASP.NET Core classes. She's gone through and got all of these together in one place, and these are all free online video courseware that you can check out. And it is all free. Like, they may try to upsell you when you're done, but the deal is, the requirement is to be on this page, you got to be free. So it's ASP.NET/free courses. Check it out, spread the word, and a good way to learn C# and .NET and .NET Core.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Speaking of courses, but ones that aren't free, I was asked to pimp a course that we're doing, well, some of us are doing, none of us, but some other people on the team are doing a Dev Intersection this month. Are you doing it, Scott? The workshop?
I'm on the list for that.
So Hunter is we have over 100 people registered, but there's still a bunch of space.
Yeah. So that's Vegas. I will probably be there. So I'll be at Dev Intersections on the 25th of, that is 2 Tuesdays from now. Right. And actually, you know what we should do? Why don't we do the community stand-up from inside the workshop?
Well, I won't be there, but yes, I can be here.
Will you be there?
You guys are
Who's
there.
doing the workshop? Hunter's doing it.
Hunter, yeah. And
The
someone else.
Hunter?
Our boss, Scott Hunter.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Watch him program. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm just kidding.
All right.
He's a very competent programmer. Yeah, so I'll be there. And if you are in Vegas, in or around Vegas, sneak in on that workshop. And 2 Tuesdays from now on the 25th at Dev Intersection.
Sweet.
All right.
Very cool. On to the next tab. We're about 10 minutes, and we're on the first tab, so I'm moving on here. Okay, Tom Dykstra, he's updated this as a very popular tutorial on getting started with ASP.NET MVC, and it's updated for ASP.NET Core MVC and Entity Framework Core. So
these are great, actually.
Yes.
It's, there's a lot of docs, and you might think that some of the docs are a little superficial. Tom Dykstra on the team there is, look at that. He's still scrolling.
He is a hero.
Very, very well vetted, very clean, very consistent, and he's got this thing going with lots and lots of details. So if you're looking for a little more of a meaty getting started, doing some real CRUD and some real work with Entity Framework, check that one out. That's great. Look at that, 49 out of 49 people found it helpful.
He's got 100%.
Let's go and put a 50 there. 50
All right.
people found it helpful.
This is Jonas, I believe, Jonas Guffin, and he's got one true error. So this is an automated exception handling system. So Scott, this was, you sent this over to me, and when I first looked at it, I was like, okay, that's great, it's just .NET, but if you scroll down, he's got a thing down here where he digs into use inside of ASP.NET as well. It works in WinForms, it works all over the place. So, I mean, this is very, significant amount of time put into this. So this is
it reminds me a little bit of, if you remember Elma, right? Error logging modules and handlers. So it's basically an open source service. You put up your own service, and then when your application has problems or crashes or whatever, it goes and it uploads those exceptions to a single server, and then you can get all the details about, is your app crashing, how's it crashing, and what are you going to do about it. Good stuff.
Yeah, really good stuff. Nicely designed all across. I mean, it's something that's, because a lot of these logging exception systems, sometimes they're you're looking at a log file. Yeah,
they get thrown together. This is very polished, and I'm sure that he would appreciate people checking it out and offering some feedback and thoughts on it.
Very cool. All right, so this is, let me see, this is Jovan, and he's writing about building REST services with Core API and Azure SQL database. So part of the reason I try and group these together sometimes to give some sort of themes here. I just pointing out here, I'm seeing more and more things showing up on code projects, some good ASP.NET Core stuff, and this again very thorough. He's put a lot of there's a lot of code here. He's put this significant walkthrough, custom graphics, so some good stuff. Bitwarden. So this is, Scott, you sent this over to me. This is from Kyle. What's neat about this is it is a password storing system. It works across, it works in browsers, it works Google Play, Apple App Store, and it is free and open source. So built using, .NET Core and ASP.NET Core, all the codes out there.
So it's kind of like 1Password. Except like I said, it's free, it's open source, you can audit it yourself, you can take a look at how the crypto is done, and the back end is entirely in .NET Core.
Very cool. Yep. Yeah, like you said, the transparency of being able to look at it and kind of trust what's going on there is really nice.
And not be concerned that it's sending your important information off somewhere.
Yep.
And quite polished, and I have to say, Bitwarden is a pretty cool title.
Nice.
Good name. Very, very nicely branded. I like it when people do open source projects, but they do it in a really well branded way. It's just a little polish. It makes you feel more confident.
Honestly, when I see a site this polished, I'm like, oh, come on, they're taking money somewhere. And I actually spent some time kind of digging through and being like, okay, no, this really is open source and completely free. It really is nicely put together. So.
It is.
Andrew Locke, he's on here every week, regular repeat offender. So he's been looking at authorization, and so here he's looking at custom authorization policies and requirements. As always, he goes through lots of code, explaining kind of not just what the code does, but why and what the point of it is. So.
Right, and it's more sophisticated authorization stuff. We usually see is admin, but he's showing complicated policies, multiple policies with multiple requirements.
Yep.
You've been making fancy ones with funcs that go on and get pretty sophisticated. And it fits in. It also shows how nicely pluggable things are in ASP.NET Core.
Yep. Yeah, really good stuff. And it's always good to see these series where he's continuing to dig into it. So Christos is writing about real-time applications using ASP.NET Core, SignalR, and Angular. Now this is SignalR 0.2.0, so this is the existing not channel using, existing SignalR.
So how does that work if SignalR is not out and ready for Core?
Because he's taking packages from MyGet.
So he's running an unstable beta daily.
Yeah, that is, John just said it's 020, which is like just a random myget version that represents wherever the code was. It's all being rewritten from scratch, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Still, spend some time going through it, and I think the combination of SignalR and Angular, just in general, is pretty compelling. The whole way of doing real time with single page applications. It gives you a lot. It's a nice combination.
Right. The concern about whether or not it's a right version of SignalR or the whatever is less interesting than how Angular plugs into it.
Exactly. Yeah. So here's one I mentioned last week. Here's the official blog post. So this is React.js Net 3.0, bringing in official .NET Core support as well as some other tweaks to it. So
nice. And they have a really nice tutorial, by the way. And that tutorial has been completely redone for .NET Core.
Yep. Yeah. Really. This is again one of these really nicely put together.
Slow down. It's too much scrolling.
There's a lot here. People can watch it on super slow mo. And
sure.
See what's there.
But it's just nice. I think that when people are looking at or appreciating open source like this, I think it's very common that people go and they say, well, gosh, this is open source, it's free, and then they demand their support, right? People put a lot of work into this stuff. They do it out of love, and I think that if you are interested in getting involved in open source, help these people write docs. You having fun with your notifications there, John?
I sure am.
Click on quiet hours.
I just did.
Good job.
Yep. And this is all Daniel. Like, I've worked with Daniel a little bit over the past few years with React stuff in general, and he is pretty much a one-man show. He's cranking a lot of stuff out here, so I'm sure he'd probably like some help and just some thanks. He does quite a bit here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of small teams doing quite a bit, this is Dominic, and he's continuing to talk about stuff they're updating for Asp Net Core. So this is Identity Model v2, and he's talking about their move from PCL to now v2 targeting Net Standard 1.3. And then he kind of points you off to the README to dig into exactly what identity model is doing for you, et cetera. So cool. This is from Renee, and he's talking about running Asp Net Core in Azure Container Service. And I've mentioned that before using Docker Swarm. He goes through using DCOS and Marathon. So kind of nice to see, digging into that as well. So running under Azure Container Service. Hisham, he's continuing a series. So here he's talking about integrating or request filtering with ASP.NET Core, and here he's talking about integrating into the ASP.NET pipeline. So a nice one from him. EasyLOB, this is out on GitHub. This is the idea is it's supposed to be an archetype, so a data-driven design archetype for building line of business applications. So all the code out on GitHub, and decent website too as well to kind of show you around. And the last one I'm going to end up with here is a proposal from Milan. I have no idea if it's a good idea or not. I just thought it was interesting. So he's talking about that you don't really have discoverability into app.use extension methods. And so his solution is possibly a little bit more complex, and maybe there's something easier out there. He's talking about using NuGet tags, creating an index service, and a Visual Studio extension. So, but the problem
he wants to make it. He wants it to make middleware discoverable.
Exactly. He wants to be able to type app.use and have middleware. And I believe he's saying like once, to be able to discover that NuGet package and kind of point you at it. So I don't know if there's an easier way, but it's a request for comment, and he's asking for comments here. So that's it for me. I think it's, every week I'm like, oh, I don't know if there's going to be anything to talk about, and then end up cutting them down.
Cool. It also looks like we may have solved our chat problem. If people go to live.asp.net, and then when they're looking at the YouTube embed, click on that top link there to go straight to YouTube, and there's now a chat thing on the right-hand side.
There is.
So that's crazy. So someone's saying one of our mics is beeping.
Yeah, I can hear it on mine. I can hear it beeping every now and then.
I've heard it too.
It's feedback. It's like feedback coming through every now and then.
Okay, well, hang on a second. Let's think about this.
So it just happened again when John touched his earpiece.
I don't think it's me, though, because...
No?
All right, so do this, John. Mute yourself.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'm done
and we'll see
talking
if it's
anyhow.
you. Seems to be Scott's. Based on what, you guys?
Because it's like, it's you. Oh, yeah. Oh, God, what are you doing?
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Is it happening right now?
It was when you moved.
Do you think it might be because I have tape on this thing?
Very possibly.
You think it might be this problem here?
What is that?
That is blue tape.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely that. Every time you touch that, things happen.
Scott, I mean...
Are you serious?
Yes, we are totally serious.
Oh, we're just having a
headphones
conversation.
are in anyhow. You really need bigger headphones.
Relax.
No, I'm going to make
Hang on
the
a second.
bugging extra difficult by saying yes. To
I am
everything you
going
say.
to then take the brand new one that I just unboxed from Amazon.
Ooh, there should be an unboxing video.
This is the only one that I love this thing, and they don't make this anymore. So I bought
Is it a Panasonic or something?
Yeah. So I'm going to unplug this and see if it blue screens my computer.
Apparently I'm fuzzy. No, I just haven't shaved. That's why I'm fuzzy. It's all right. Oh, out of focus? No, surely not.
Soft focus. You're in soft focus.
I'm in soft focus. That's the Vaseline I put on the lens to take off 10 years.
Yeah.
Can't hear Scott. Can't hear Scott. Apparently you added some effects, John.
I'm hoping to.
Yeah.
You know, I've done this in the past, and you guys didn't even notice. It was so great.
Really?
Yeah.
Still can't hear Scott.
The best is that the effects has a randomize feature.
Hear Scott. Oh, really? Such value. Oh, dude. No.
Just get rid of that. They love the birthday cake. Okay, I'm done there. Oh, wait, no, I have to remove the effects. I don't know if I can. I'm stuck. Remove all effects. Okay.
Still can't hear Scott. Apparently, I'm back in focus. Beep is fixed. Focus is fixed, but we can't hear Scott.
Yeah, Scott. So, Scott, I see you're like... No, do I?
No, that's yours going up and down. That's your meter going up and down. Scott is making the fist of death.
Mm-hmm.
And he says he's talking.
He's welcoming us to his house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mikasa Suka. Oh, he wants us to talk. Okay, well, I will chat about what we've been doing. So a bunch of stuff. Our next minor release will be coming out shortly. We're currently pulling bits all together to try and do a preview of that. As soon as stuff is ready, then we'll make an announcement and ship it out. You can look at the GitHub repos right now to see what issues are marked in the 1.1. It's called 1.1 is kind of the overarching name, even if the package versions for any particular component aren't. The overarching release is just 1.1. So you can go and have a look at the issues that are being talked about in 1.1. You can also look at the roadmap for the very high level features and things that we're going to deliver in 1.1. I'll say straight off the bat, there are some things that won't be in 1.1 that we may have alluded to in the past that they would be. So there will be no SignalR in 1.1, and there will be no Razor pages or view pages or whatever the name ends up being in 1.1. They are going to come in the next release, which will be next year. 1.1 should be out before the end of this year. I mean, we're already in October, so we're not talking about a very long time. But those features won't be there. So the thing that is there, we've got a couple of new middlewares, or middlesware, as our dev manager likes to say. We've got quite a few things, actually. I mean, you can go and look at the roadmap to look at those. I've talked about them already, so that's kind of boring. What I wanted to talk about was stuff that's coming after 1.1, which we've started working on now because they're more long lead engineering efforts. As they're called. Hello?
Sorry.
You're back.
It works now.
And so I wanted to show a couple of things that we're working on right now. We're doing some active work right now on designing what the next version of SignalR is going to look like on top of Asp Net Core. And a lot of that is actually involved not what SignalR itself looks like, because SignalR is basically just hubs and you add methods and you call some APIs and magic happens, right? It's everything that's underneath that we're going to revisit completely. And we're also rethinking how scale-out works, because the scale-out solution that we had in SignalR, while very simple to get set up, that simplicity resulted in a whole bunch of issues whenever you wanted to do any type of real scale. And so you basically had to throw out the scale out solution and do something custom. And so we're trying to build from the ground up with a couple of new principles that we didn't have in the first two versions of Signaler. And as a result of that, hopefully we'll end up with a slightly more flexible system. So I want to show you a little quick code sample. I'm just going to share a screen, which I hope is the right one. Let's do that. And Scott, tell me when you can see things. I will zoom in.
Lovely. Make it bigger.
I'm getting there, dude. I'm waiting for Chrome to respond to my keystrokes. All right. So previously in Signaler, the base primitive underneath the hub was called a connection, or a persistent connection. You could derive from persistent connection, and that would become an endpoint effectively in your application, and things could connect to that persistent connection endpoint. Okay, and then you would basically get a connection, like on-connected event, and in the on-connected event, you could do stuff. You could send to the client, you could receive from the client. Anyone who's ever done sockets programming, where you start up a socket server, you handle the on-connected event for when new people connect, and then you do stuff, would be familiar with that. But it was a bit of a ball of mud in Signaler. Like, it really wasn't designed from the ground up with that in mind. We kind of expected most people were going to operate at the hub level. So we're going back and we're revisiting this base layer. At the moment, the working title is Asp.Net Sockets, which is effectively a socket programming model built on top of Asp.Net. And the primitive is an endpoint. So I derive from endpoint just like I would derive from controller, although that's kind of the wrong level of abstraction. Probably easier to think of this more like a middleware. Okay, so it's kind of that level of abstraction. I'm really quite down low. So there'll be a single instance of this class constructed in my application at runtime that represents this endpoint. So it's stateful. And then as new connections come along and connect to this endpoint, which you can see here in the onConnected method, and I get given a connection, then a list of connections is built up that I can operate over time. And when this method is invoked for any given connection, this is a very typical sort of socket programming model. You do a while loop. While true, you read some data off the socket, you inspect the data, you dispatch and do what it is you want to do with that data, and then you turn around and you...
So it's like reactive sockets.
Well, it's just like sockets in generally, right? I mean, really, depending on the framework, whatever construct you get given to represent the socket, typically in .NET you would be given a stream. And so you would get a stream that represents the actual bytes going back and forth over the socket. Then it would be up to you to create a buffer to read into from the socket, for example. This is built on top of something called channels, which is an experimental API that we've been developing at the moment in conjunction with the .NET team. That we're hoping will take care of a lot of the common problems that people run into when trying to build highly scalable .NET server applications, specifically things around memory management and memory pooling and buffer pooling and how to manage buffers and return them and all these kind of complicated things that everyone has to do from scratch if they want to build complicated servers. Like we did in Kestrel, we did all that stuff manually. We're trying to take what we learned from Kestrel, take what we've learned from looking at competitive stacks and what we've looked at custom servers like the one that Stack Overflow wrote for their WebSocket server, and we're trying to build a new primitive that people can use that takes care of all these problems for them. But it's very similar to programming with sockets and streams. So you can see here I have my connection, I grab its channel, and then I get to the input side of the channel. So it's full duplex. There's an input side and an output side. And then I say, hey, just read async. And then at some point, when there is data that comes in off that channel, I'll get given back a result, which is a buffer. And then from that buffer, I can start doing stuff. And this is all done in a very memory efficient, pooled, so no allocation effectively way. And I can do things with that buffer like splice it and inspect it and mark what I've consumed and those type of things via this API. And all the memory management and the hard stuff is taken care of for me. What's also interesting is that notice this code has no idea how the connection got to me. I don't actually know if this is a TCP socket. I just know it's called a connection, right? Underlying this can be any manner of channel server or channel producer. Now, it just so happens that in this model, this is sitting on top of HTTP in ASP.NET Core. So that connection could be a long polling connection. It could be a WebSocket. It could be server-sent events with the client-to-server solved via AJAX. It could be a .NET client using TCP sockets, right? An actual TCP socket under the cover. Or it could be anything else that I've written a channel provider for, or the server has done so for me, that produces this a channel that gives me input and a channel that gives me output. Okay, and then we wrap that up in an abstraction called a connection. We expose the endpoint by way of this input type, and then you just write code that looks like it's reading and writing from a channel, which, like I said, is very much like a socket or a stream. So in this case, this is a chat endpoint. So I'm going to sit here and wait for data. I just first check when I get data if it's empty. So if I got some empty stuff from the buffer, then I'm going to break out of the loop. That means it's the end of the socket is completed. Otherwise, I'm going to go around and go ahead and call broadcast. So I'm just going to broadcast whatever was sent to me out to everyone else that's currently listening on this endpoint. And if I look at the broadcast method, I go down here. This takes a string. It gets the bytes from that string by calling encoding.utf8.getBytes, because the underlying channel API is sockets, essentially, so it's all bytes. And my broadcasting is very simple. I say, here's my byte payload. Get me a list of tasks, which is based on the number of connections I currently have connected to this endpoint. So that's pretty straightforward. And then for every connection, go through and on the connection in that list, in this for loop, go to its output channel and write the payload out to it. So that's effectively doing it in parallel. Right? So this is where we're mixing parallelization with asynchrony here, which I know can explode some people's brains if they haven't done a lot of this programming before. This is not an async method. Note it's not actually marked with async. So I'm going to take a little time here to explain this because it can get a little confusing. I'm calling an async method here and getting back a task, but I'm not awaiting it. So that's just going to go off and do something asynchronously. I'm going to capture that promise or that handle on that asynchrony because it's just a task. And then down here, I'm going to wait on all those tasks to finish. So I'm effectively doing a parallel for each over all the connections I have and saying send to every single one. Does that make sense? Yes. Silence means that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. I don't know if I like the name socket, though.
Let's just ignore the fact that I said the working title is ASP.NET Sockets.
Okay.
Why don't you like the name?
I like Jetstream.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
It's a great name.
It is, but we're not doing that.
Why would you take a boring title over an awesome title?
Well, Signaler will still be a thing. Signaler will be the hub programming model that's on top of this.
Right, this would be system.io.jetstream.
Okay, I'll take that under consideration. I'll take that feedback. I'll go talk to the team.
I'm just saying, people would love that and write articles about it. If you call it sockets, people,
you know as much as anybody that every time we try and come up with a new name, that it's never as straightforward. Like, it's so much easier for us just to create things that are descriptive. Every time we try and coin a new term, it becomes.
You're overloading the concept of sockets, though.
I know. Just like Socket.io did. It's no different. If you have a better name, and I'm sure everyone, I can see my chat just like streaming down this side of the thing right now. So everyone thinks they have a better name. Plugs. Thank you, Nick.
I've just I've just given it to you.
Sockets and plugs. That's awesome. Maybe I'll just remove all the vowels. Socket without no N.
So suck it.
Yes. So that's it. That's the most basic sort of broadcast chat endpoint you could write on top of this abstraction. And as I said, you don't know that underneath this is HTTP or TCP or something that's built on HTTP but has like a duplex system set up that you don't understand, that you're not aware of from this code. Like I said, it could be a long polling connection plus AJAX sends, just like we did in Signaler. So this will become the base primitive for doing this type of programming, and then Signaler and hubs and the transport negotiation with long polling, WebSockets, and server-side events would all be built on top of this abstraction. So far, this pattern is proving, is working out really well. Like we're kind of taking this idea now and we're hammering it with a whole bunch of different samples and scenarios to see if it still holds up. And we've got a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm not showing here, which is built on top of this again, that is really nice. Like the ability to do, instead of saying read async and getting back a buffer, which is just bytes, what if I could do a read async of T, and the T was any class that I wanted, and then it would use formatters, very similar to what you have in MVC, where you have type formatters. What if you could then just use a formatter that can go from whatever format the connection is speaking in, JSON, protobuf, message pack, pick your format, and then turn it into the T that you asked for. It's effectively serialization and deserialization. But we have a very nice API set and a bunch of primitives that we're building here that we're then going to build Signaler on top of. And we think this is a really, really nice programming model so far. So that's a very, very, very early sneak peek of some in-progress prototypes right now. You can even see this isn't in the ASP.NET Core repo right now. This is just in David's GitHub. We're going to move this over to a new repo that we just created this week. If for those who haven't seen this, because there's nothing in it yet, called ASP.NET Labs. And you can see there is no code in here yet. But there will be some code in here very shortly as we move the socket stuff in here and the channel stuff in here so we can continue that work. We've already been working with people in the community on the channel stuff. So I know the Stack Overflow guys, Mark and Nick have been taking a good look at this. I think Mark even replumbed their custom WebSocket server on top of it. And he did a blog post, which was cool. Ben Adams of Kestrel Performance fame has been doing a bunch of work on it as well. And a whole bunch of other people have been diving in to have a look at that, which is kind of exciting. So that's going on, which is cool. And I've already talked about Razor Pages on here, which I'm glad to say has, how do I stop my screen sharing? There it is. I'm glad to say has moved beyond the prototype stage, and we're now in the stage of, we've learned everything we wanted to learn from the Razor Pages prototype, which is still on GitHub. You can get it at ASP.NET/Razor Pages. But we're now in the phase of actually taking everything we learned and building a real product in MVC on top of that. We think we've come up with a really nice programming model for server-side sort of page stuff built on the MVC primitive. So I'm looking forward to people seeing that too. And that will come out at the same timeline as the signaler/socket/yet-to-be-named thing that I've shown you just now.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to update people on. There's a bunch of little stuff.
Where have you been for 6 weeks?
Where have I been?
Justify where you've been and why you've left us.
I've been doing everything I just talked about. I don't know, actually. I think every week it was just something else, right?
Shipping stuff. Yeah. Well, like that's the thing, right? People like to watch the show or whatever, but I was on the road and you were on the road and you were growing a beard and Galloway was shaving his head. I mean, stuff happens.
Takes time.
So we take some questions. Go and have a look in the chat and see if anyone wants to.
Let's give it a try. Are we going to see compilation speed improvements in 1.1?
Not in 1.1. So 1.1 is not a tooling release. Tooling, this is just a runtime release. 1.1 will just be updates to packages, essentially. And so, no, you will see improvements to compilation time as part of the move from Project JSON to MS Build, which there will be some more news about very shortly, I believe.
Okay. Is there any update on system.drawing for core?
No.
No, I would take a look at imageprocessor.org and look at imageprocessor.org. Has that stuff happening now, being worked on, and then also Nathaniel was it imageresizer.net. Either one of those. So there's a couple of choices for ASP.NET core resizing.
Now that said, we will revisit that at some point because I acknowledge that that's actually a big gap and we do need something. Not that system.drawing was all that great, especially in server scenarios.
No, it really wasn't, because underlying, like if you look at, actually there's some really interesting blog posts by Bertrand from like 10 years ago when I used to be really into this kind of stuff. Even when you use system.drawing, there's at least 3 different ways to do like resizing, whether it be GDI or DirectX or whatever, and then it all depends on whether or not those things are whitelisted in whatever cloud you decide to use. So there was a time when you couldn't even do resizing with system.drawing on Antares, which is the code name for ASP.NET web apps.
Yeah, and
then they didn't allow it.
System.drawing takes global locks to do things
really
as well,
does.
which is you don't want to do generally in a server application. So
yeah, I think they used to not do global locks, and then they added them, and
because of safety problems. Yeah,
for safety problems. So yeah. Oh, here's a good suggestion for your sockets.
Okay.
ASP.NET real-time messaging framework for home and small business.
Oh, nice.
That's pretty good.
We will never live that down.
It's never us, man.
Yeah.
Will web app for Linux preview support ASP.NET Core? And we've already talked to that team, and who just put out. We have Node and PHP support for.
We're talking about Azure to be specific.
For Azure, very specifically, Azure App Service, Azure Web Apps. When you do a git deploy on top of a VM that's managed by someone else, right now on the Windows side, you can use Node, PHP, and Java, and Python, and .NET Core, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And on the Linux side, right now, you can do Node and PHP. If enough people want .NET Core, I'm sure that you can talk to them. The person to talk to is named Nassim Lala, Nazimlala.
I just
Damien?
remembered one other thing I wanted to show you. So I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry.
Oh, okay, cool.
Literally just remember. I saw a question that reminded me of something I was going to show. So I'm going to share this screen with you now. You see that?
Yeah.
This is my not a microservice, because I'm not going to say microservices because that term is too overloaded.
Is that why you named it microservice?
That's why it's called microservice. Okay, I actually wanted to call it not a microservice, but I didn't have time to rename it in time for this for the show. So this is not possible today. I wrote some extension methods that make this possible, but I want you to drink that in. There are a class of people, I am not judging them, who want a very, very simple way in one file to stand up an HTTP server and then do very basic.
I told you about this.
Services.
I want that right there, or Nancy with a CSS file.
So I didn't build anything new. All I did was create some extension methods that makes it easier to use what we have today.
So you wrote an extension to mapget.
So basically, what I have done, I'm going to show you, because there's an issue. Here it is. I just logged this issue in the routing repo to add extensions on Web Host Builder for super simple HTTP service application building. Okay, so we are looking at doing exactly this, so that people who want to, who like this pattern, I just want to, hey, I want to like
nice and clean. I like it. I want.
Very clean.
Remember, I yelled at you about server.csx.
Oh yeah, CSX. Yeah,
a while back, because I want to be able to. Because right now, if you look at the quote unquote competition, there's server.rb and server.js and server. I want server.csx, and I want that right there.
So Nick's saying maybe we could say mini service. Is this a pico service, a microservice, a femto service? Maybe we could just
service.
A femto service.
That's the new hotness.
So obviously, this bit is obviously optional because by default we listen on port 5000. But generally, in a real app, you'll have to put like your actual URL here, like whatever that would bind to all public ports for IP addresses, for example. But what's nice about this is it isn't raw middleware. This is routing to middleware, and the thing that routing gives you, which I think is super powerful, is this stuff, right? It's dispatching with capturing from the URL. And then because this extension method here, this one, it passes you the route data dictionary, you just you get stuff straight out of it like this. Like I actually find this really, really nice. So I hope other people find this nice, because I knocked this up today and I've logged the issue, and we're talking about basically updating the routing package to include these extension methods. And then having a new template in Visual Studio called Asp Net Core HTTP service or mini HTTP service or something that would effectively just be this. And you would have a single file where you say use router, map get, map post, whatever you want, and it's that, and that's your app.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and if you and that'll be nice for like the the sharp, what is it, script CS folks. And then you can remove the namespace, the public class, whatever. Put in the pound R.
That pound R is the big thing, right? That's the one thing.
Pound R, man. I love that.
So yeah, so that's coming to a thing near you at some point. So I hope people like the idea. Okay, good. All right, so let's go back to the questions.
Scrumptious. Well, now there's too much chat going on too fast.
There's some in the getter business.
We'll need to come up with a format so people like.
Here you go. Maybe a little brief update on MS Build, CS Proj, and all that stuff.
No. Watch the blog, as we've previously stated. I'm not going to be giving updates on that, and there will be a blog post on that coming shortly.
All right, cool.
And while you're looking it up, if you're curious, like we pointed out before, you can watch the repos. Like you can see code and tests being checked in on those things too.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's pretty low level. It's like standing in the river and watching like the water flow over you, right? As opposed to someone just saying, "Hey, this is coming." So,
what is the recommended way to access microservices from an Asp Net Core app? I think that people.
That all depends on what the microservice is written in.
Right, exactly. And do you do Docker or all those kind of questions? It's the same way you do it with any other microservice framework, right? Now that you have the ability to use Docker or use any cloud that makes you happy or use anything that makes you happy.
Well, I think the term access is a little overloaded too. Do they mean connect to a microservice, or do they mean discover a microservice? Or create a microservice, because all those things I interpreted as how do they connect to a microservice. So I'm not really sure exactly what they meant. But
I see. Yeah. I see. I can't read this. It's going too fast. There's too much crap here. Maybe put a big all caps question : that would be lovely. People who are asking questions.
Yes, I was wondering that. We need like a format that says like
just say question :
star Q : blah blah blah.
Because right now it's just it's hard to tell.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there's a few in the getter. There's one, and you may have answered these. I'm just reading them anyhow. Hisham asked, when you were showing the SignalR thing, if there's a way to use publish subscribe pattern or some sort of event bus instead of using like a well true.
Yes, and so the very bottom primitive will be a connection, which is effectively a channel up and down, right? And that's bytes in, bytes out. That's the lowest primitive. And then on top of that, we can layer, or you can layer, as many patterns as you want. So that repo I showed you has an RPC endpoint pattern, so that you can do more like RPC dispatching and take a payload that is a certain message type, say JSON RPC or something like that. For PubSub, we have the hubs stuff in Signaler will be based on PubSub, because that's how we want scale out to work. So once you get to scale out, you really want to be sending messages around as effectively PubSub. So you have a bunch of connections subscribe to a particular signal, and then you publish to that signal, and then they all receive that. So you get that decoupling between the two. We haven't got firm plans to actually ship a PubSub abstraction or implementation, because what we've found is most people end up choosing a PubSub platform and just write to that, whether it be Redis or Service Bus or RabbitMQ or NService Bus or whatever it might be. And for Signaler, there would be a PubSub mechanism behind the scenes to make hubs work, but whether we expose that as just a thing that you can bring in, we're still determining. Like we might not, but we get there's always a little discussion that goes on whenever we try and introduce a new abstraction, especially for things that are so generic. Like if we had like iPubSub, like you basically end up having to codify the lowest possible common denominator of every PubSub system on the planet. It's just, and admittedly, it's the same problem we run into when we create an abstraction for DI and when we create abstractions for loggers and all those type of things. We've chosen those very carefully. PubSub is another example of those.
Cool. A few people asking about Razor without MVC.
Yeah, so as part of the Razor Pages work, we are going through a large effort to essentially refactor Razor from the ground up to make it a lot more conducive to being used. Razorlicious. I think it does have a cool name. I can't remember what it was. Taylor created a new Razor.
Are you serious? A cooler name than Razor?
No, it's Razor something.
Oh, Razor-tastic?
Razor Reloaded, I think, or something he's called it, or something. I don't know.
Really, I like Razor. I wouldn't change much of it. I thought it was funny because wasn't it David who specifically did not want to add a bunch of additional keywords to Razor, or is it you?
No, it doesn't. So, sorry, let me be clear. We are making some changes to the plumbing of what it means to be. Razor is many things. Razor is a language, or a templating language, I should say, but you can't use it without a Razor host. Mm-hmm. And today, to build a Razor host, we don't have a generic Razor host. We have the MVC Razor host. There's an abstract Razor host at the bottom that you have to derive from and then implement 73 methods to make it do anything useful.
There have been a few open source projects to do that.
Email ones, Nancy has one. So we're trying to make that better. So as part of building Razor Pages, we've realized that, oh my God, this is a terrible problem. We need to make it a much better, more easily extensible subsystem so that you can consume Razor, you can build a custom Razor host and not have to customize everything to do the most basic thing. And then we want that to work in Visual Studio in the Razor editor. So we're making changes to how Razor works in Visual Studio so that if I have a custom Razor host in my application, or as it referenced by my application, one that isn't MVC, then tooling works. Today, tooling only understands the MVC Razor host, doesn't understand any other Razor host. We want to fix that, and we're now working on fixing that problem, like right now, for early next year.
Nice.
So that will. So some people commented when I showed the not a microservice framework stuff before. They said that coupled with a generic way to do Razor would be like the killer framework. I would use that everywhere, right? So we're not that far from that. Like that would actually be something that we'd be very, very close to.
Cool. Now they're rolling out with a bunch of questions. Now there's too many questions, and I'm getting.
This is what happens when you ask it.
JavaScript services update. How's that going? Well, we should probably get Sanderson back.
Yeah.
on.
So Sanderson, we had a meeting about that not long ago. The next step was we wanted to get it in front of more people, so we wanted to make it more consumable, and so to do that, we're building Visual Studio templates. And so he now has a V6 that you can install that means that you can basically just go file new Angular JavaScript services app for Asp Net Core. So that we can get more feedback about what people think is the right sort of approach and direction to take there. I'll be very, very honest with you. I still have a lot of reservations about that approach, simply because to build a functional application, you need to take in a lot of external dependencies to get anything that works end to end. The end to end is amazing. Like the developer experience that we've been showing in some of our workshops, that John has a workshop that he does, or a segment in the workshop where he shows all this stuff. And you've got React, you've got Redux, you've got live module reloading, there's Webpack in there, there's TypeScript, there's blah, blah, every possible thing.
It reads like that Medium thing that I teased you with earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's a lot of stuff, which is, I think, is fine because they all serve a purpose. The problem is, it's JavaScript. The lifetime of these things is always an unknown. Like just today, I learned that there's a new NPM compatible package manager which is being built, which is is great because they're actually trying to address a lot of the problems with NPM and they've made it compatible with NPM. JavaScript is in that phase, and like you teased me with that article, and I pushed back very hard internally on that because I'm kind of a grumpy old web dev who's like, yeah, stop treating the web like it's a single file with a little bit of JavaScript. Everyone balks at complexity in JavaScript because I believe they have these preconceived ideas of what JavaScript should be. It's like, oh, it's just why is it not just site.js with a bunch of functions? Like, no, like JavaScript is in this phase where we said it was a toy for a long time. Now people have realized that the browser is a VM. You can do amazing things, and so it's going through this phase of innovation, which we did. Like everything that we build is just layers upon layers of top of machine code. And no one blinks an eyelid at the fact that C# is effectively exactly the same as Java, which is effectively exactly the same as choose your other object-oriented managed language, sitting on top of some runtime which has a complex tool chain that basically abstracts away the world from you. But you typically pick one, and then you use that and you go, and it's backed by a large company and da-da-da-da. We're just not at that phase with JavaScript. We're still at the, oh my God, everyone is innovating at the speed of light phase because everyone's just realized just how powerful this is. Couple that with the way web standards work and how long it takes, and the fact that there are still 3 or 4 major browsers, and we have to think about how mobile works now as well as desktop, and there's a lot of complexity because of the reach of the web platform. I still think the benefits far outweigh the pains there, but I'm not at all saying it's painless. It is somewhat painful, but I think that's what you pay for when you get into. That's what you just have to deal with when you get into the web. But it'll get better.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
one nice thing I saw with JavaScript services, and I ran into this when I was demoing it before down in Sydney with you, was I tried demoing in Edge and it didn't work, right? Because event source doesn't work there. And so they just fixed it, they added in a polyfill for that. So they've accepted that. So that's nice. So, and this goes way back now to like IE8 or something, the polyfill does. So that's kind of nice. For the hot module reload.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So very active development. I've been watching that repo, and it's like, there's a lot going on there.
It's really amazing, but at the same time, it's like 87 dependencies, and even now you get warnings because some 20-year-old that wrote the thing that's 6 layers up in the stack got updated or is now deprecated or whatever. It has been a long time since I've written a Node app where I've been able to get npm install to go without warnings.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think right now it's a great example of. I think there seems to be a very active community on the GitHub repo, like you said, John, and there's a lot of people who are already using most of those technologies, and so seeing them brought together with the JavaScript services stuff for ASP Net Core is just like a no-brainer to them. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing, because I was already using 3 of the 17, or maybe 10 of the 17 things anyway. I was already using TypeScript and Sass, and I was already using NPM, and I was already using Angular, and I was already using ASP Net Core, and you just made it better, right? But if I'm just a server-side rendering ASP.NET Core person, and then I see this, then it's jarring. And that's because going from server-side programming to SPA programming or heavily client-side programming, there is a lot to learn. There really, really is. And if you just go with the basics, if you literally just go with JavaScript and CSS and HTML and nothing else, you're not going to be terribly productive. Like, we know that there are problems with those primitives, and that's why people have said JavaScript is the assembly language of the web, because no one really wants to program all the way down there for super complicated things. We have much better tools for being productive in those types of apps, but the tool chain isn't unified.
It's complex.
It's complex, right? There isn't the file new Visual Studio for that world yet. And I don't think we'll see it until it calms down a bit, because I still think we're in that innovation phase. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's a really important thing that you just said, is if you're already using this stuff, and I've talked to people that were like, I'm already doing NPM and Webpack and this and that, and I'm tweaking all the things to make it all work together. It's a pain and then it's like, wow, you just wrapped it up and it all works. This is great. But totally agree. If you're not using, if you aren't using those things, then it's going to add a lot of complexity you don't want at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, someone said they always thought I was a server guy. I actually, before I joined Microsoft, I was a client guy. I was the guy who did all the CSS and all the JavaScript on the teams, just as Ajax.
Really?
Like, yeah, back then it was like we had just embraced Ajax, and like there wasn't really a concept of spas. It was just you had pages that did a lot of Ajax and a lot of CSS. So I did all that stuff, and the rest of the team did. I mean, I did .NET as well. I did a lot of web forms, but most of the other team would do the server stuff. And then I haven't done any of that professionally for 7 years now. So don't listen to anything I say. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
That's interesting. For a bunch of not diverse people, we have a very diverse background. I was doing DevOps before I knew what DevOps was called. Like I was all about build automation and deployment automation. Like everything that I did when I was in banking before here was figuring out how to get the stuff on your machine onto 26 machines.
Yeah.
And keep it that way. That was my whole thing. And now
before that I was a database guy. So like you can't tell, right?
Really?
I like SQL.
I can do so
look at EF, and I can respect EF for what it does, but when I think about talking to a database, I think in SQL.
Really?
And when I think about a schema, I think in DDL and DML. Like that's how I think. And that's why I like things like Dapper. But that's because I'm 20 years in this industry and I've gone through it all. So
yeah. I like Dapper. I was all about micro ORMs. All the stuff I did in banking was just the tiniest layer on top of a templating language that made SQL.
Yeah. So like I think there was going back. I mean, we've just gone on a total tangent here, but people seem to be liking it. So like that article you talked about, which was the very well written and entertaining sort of beginner talks to competent developer who wants to do a simple thing on the web
says like, can I just start with jQuery? And they're like, nobody does jQuery. Now you need this. Now you need that.
So that was a very entertaining article, but there was a great Twitter thought stream from I think someone that you follow, Scott. You've retweeted her a few times. That summed up my feeling on that very, very distinctly, which was basically, I mean, to try and boil it down, it was like, hey, developers live in a constant state of never knowing enough to do what they do. Like that is just what our constant state is. And it's an uncomfortable state for generally smart people to be in, right? Like, so if you can't deal with that, then you might be in the wrong industry.
But see, that's a cop-out, right? You're saying computers are hard.
Well, specifically web dev and JavaScript web dev, right? Like if you want something stable, you can write database queries, and that'll mostly work,
I don't like the amount of overhead to do Hello World, and I feel like I've seen people go and write enterprise templates because they believe that they're preparing for some complexity that never then comes.
But I would push back and say that I saw that in the year 2001 on .NET 1.1 as well. That is not a new problem.
Like I've seen like 7 or 8 projects in a solution because the app's enterprise and we need to manage change or whatever, but the app never goes beyond a CRUD app.
Yeah.
It needs.
I went to talks in the early 2000s where big A architects were saying never depend on any .NET library directly. Always wrap everything with your own abstraction because it might burn you one day. And they would give war stories about when they didn't do it, and then they had to spend 3 days changing the code base. I'm like, really? It's software. That's why it's called software and not firmware, because it's easy to change.
I don't like writing additional stuff and wrappers to anticipate change that might come.
There are middle grounds, and over time, they always talk about the journey that developers go through, during their maturity phase, right? And it's like you start out knowing nothing, then you learn a whole bunch of stuff, and you become architecty. And you start using all this great stuff, overcomplicate everything, and then 10 or 15 or 20 years in, or depending on who you are, then you realize, then you go back to doing everything as simple as possible again, and only introducing complexity when you realize you absolutely have to. And like the best developers are those that can see complexity and get to simplicity quickly, which is the hardest thing to achieve in practically any engineering, right? But I went through those phases. I remember being the architect-y guy saying, no, we have to do this pattern, this pattern, this pattern, this pattern, because we might do this and we might do that, we might do that. It's like, over time, you just kind of go do it when you need to. Yagni.
You're not going to need it.
Yeah. Anyway. Any questions?
People are talking about Portal now, which is fun because I'm playing it through with my 9-year-old lately.
Okay.
I know there's more questions. I mean, there's, let me see.
This chat's a good format. We should do this next week. This is good.
Yeah.
We should argue more.
We should argue more.
All right, cool. We got to go. Right. It's been a long time.
Yes.
You're all lovely. Yeah. We didn't answer all your questions, and we're bad people.
We've been catching up.
We can try to go through the the chat that's there.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, dramatic zoom out.
Mm.
Yes, indeed. Engaged.
Right.
Dramatic zoom out.
It's so
When he does the dramatic zoom out, I turn on disco mode on my lights.
Like Flight of the Conchords there. They're Australian, right?
See.
Yes, I know you're trolling. I know you're trolling.